didn't realize that you could actually build a 7-figure company around wholesaling. I knew that the people that were doing 7 figures, they were taking a different approach than what I was doing. I decided to invest into my journey and get around these people who are already doing 7 figures, because I truly believed that if I could just get around them, if I could get in proximity with those people, if I could learn what they were doing, I believed that I could get to that 7-figure level as well.
James, thank you for joining me on our Thought Leader Spotlight series. I'm your host over here, Matt Camp, head of partnerships at DealMachine. And on these, we really like to shine an industry spotlight on experts like yourself, bring you on to hear your inspiring stories and see how you see the real estate world evolving. So today, I'm very excited to welcome on James Hodges. Again, really appreciate you taking the time out, man, as you're traveling with the family. I know you went from literally $17K a year as a personal trainer, launched a wholesaling business, and then in the next 12 months did over $1 million, like $1.1 million with that wholesaling business. So that's an incredible journey there. Did $2 million in your first 18 months. I know you've built a couple of 7-figure businesses since then. You're a best-selling author. You've helped 80 plus people scale to 6 figures a month in their real estate businesses. So we've got a ton to dive into here, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Super pumped to be here, Matt.
Yeah, James, I mean, I touched on a little bit about your journey there, but can you tell us more about what that was like, that transition, and how you got to be, have that success so quickly in your real estate journey?
Yeah, it was funny because with the transition, so going from making $17,000 per year, one of the things that I highlight for people is that, I tell people the $17,000 per year version of James would not have been able to operate and run a 7-figure business. And so while there were a lot of real estate strategies, business strategies that I had to learn, one of the more important things that I had to walk through was recreating myself over and over again at a rapid pace in that first 12 months. And so walking through just the initial journey. So I started out, I didn't have hardly any money. I was making $17,000 per year as a personal trainer. And I had $1,000 credit card. It was my first credit card that I ever got. And that's what I used as the seed capital to start my business. I bought a course online that gave me just the bare bones basics of how to start wholesaling. I mean, it gave me contracts. It gave me a slight formula on how to evaluate houses. And then it showed how to put out bandit signs and drive for dollars. And that was it. That was all the direction that I had initially getting started. And so I started with putting out bandit signs. I would put out 50 bandit signs every Friday night. I'd start at about 8 p.m. and I'd stay up until 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, just plastering the town with bandit signs. And that's where my first deal came from. Made $4,300 on my first deal. And then my next 2 deals, one of them came from driving for dollars, actually. It was a $15,000 deal. It was like the 5th person that I called. She picked up, said, hey, I'm willing to sell the house. Go over there right now. I've got a handyman over there, and have him let you in and then make me an offer. So, I mean, I knew nothing about real estate. I'm just slinging mud against the wall, and threw out an offer, and she accepted it. And within an hour, we had the contract signed. Wow. And so that was the second deal. And the third one came from, so I learned how to do marketing, digital marketing, when I was running my personal training business. And the third one came from some digital marketing ads that I was running.
Nice.
So that was like the inception of it. I ended up making $34,000 between those 3 deals. And that was enough to give me the confidence to go full time in real estate. But then instead of, just going in and buying a house or paying off all my debt or buying a car with the initial capital that I gained from those first 3 deals, what I did was, because the whole time while I was driving for dollars, I'm listening to podcasts. I'm listening to these real estate podcasts, and I'm hearing about people that have built 7-figure wholesaling companies. Because initially when I got started in wholesaling, I thought that wholesaling was just the entry point into real estate investing, that it was like this lower level exit strategy that you eventually graduated away from into higher level exit strategies. And I didn't realize that you could actually build a 7-figure company around wholesaling. And so I started listening to these podcasts, and I'm hearing people doing 7 figures, multiple 7 figures in just wholesaling. And some of these podcasts were advertising mastermind groups. And so I knew that the people that were doing 7 figures, they were taking a different approach than what I was doing. Because everything that I was doing up until that point to get those first 3 deals done was all hustle. It required my time, my effort in order to get deals across the line. And I knew that it wasn't going to scale to the 7-figure level. So instead of, blowing that money from those first couple of deals, I decided to invest into my journey and get around these people who are already doing 7 figures. Because I truly believed that if I could just get around them, if I could get in proximity with those people, that if I could learn what they were doing, I believed that I could get to that 7-figure level as well. And that was really the thing that changed everything. I got into this mastermind group, and, immediately, first event that I went to in this mastermind group, it was like my head was exploding. I mean, I'm seeing, all these people, the marketing strategies that they're doing. They're all doing direct mail, and they have cold calling teams and all this stuff. And but then I noticed something else. I noticed that every single person who was doing 7 figures, all the business owners, not a single one of them was sitting in the frontline operation seats of the business. Not a single one of them. All of them had teams in place. All the business owners were removed from acquisitions. They were removed from dispositions. They were removed from lead management. And meaning they weren't talking to sellers. They weren't talking to buyers. They weren't doing transaction coordinating. They had delegated all of those positions. Every single one of the people who were at the 7-figure and multiple 7-figure level. So right after I closed my first deals, I realized that I had to build a team if I was going to get to 7 figures. So a couple of components that allowed me to get to that level. So I had a roadmap. I knew what it looked like. I knew what the model looked like, because I saw people who were operating at that level. And I saw the marketing systems that they were using, some of the sales processes, and also I saw that all of them had a team. So I start putting I made a goal. I said, I'm going to get myself removed from the frontline seats of the business as fast as possible. And so right when these deals closed, hired my first team member, which was a lead manager. A month later, hired an acquisition rep. 2 months later, hired a disposition rep. And then I actually ended up scaling too fast. Went from no team members to 14 team members within the first four months.
Wow.
And was operating in 4 markets. Then I eventually had to scale it back, but and we'll get into this a little bit on the podcast today, but that's how I started to learn about market selection and how not all markets are created equal. And there is an ideal real estate market that when we can tap into these markets, it allows for lower cost per acquisition, but also increased profitability on our deals. Those are some of the key components. Once we really dialed in the marketing approach, our team, and the markets, those were some of the keys that allowed my team to scale to $1 million in the first 12 months.
Man, that's quite a journey. I love hearing you laying that out there on how you've evolved. One thing you mentioned, like, hey, you had to level up yourself as well. You had to evolve yourself, not just your business, but you, James, personally, through that process. I mean, we've got plenty of people listening here who maybe they're working on their first deal or their first couple deals, and they're trying to figure out how to evolve themselves to get to that next level personally as well. Like, do you have any advice there of what people can be doing personally, not just in real estate, to help them level up to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it requires a full-on immersion into, because the way that you operate, the mode of thinking, whenever, like, if you're making, whether it's $17,000 a year or $50,000 or even $100,000 per year, there's a certain mode of thinking and operating that you're currently operating at. And the people who are doing seven figures, multiple seven figures, there are different mindsets that they have adopted, different routines, habits, practices that they have adopted that allow them to operate at that level. And so, one of those practices is, seven figure people, they get things done through other people instead of doing everything themselves. So there's a book out there called Who, Not How. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the philosophies. It's a mindset that seven figure people have to adopt if they're going to get to the seven figure level. But when I talk about evolving as a person, and there were multiple evolutions that had to happen as a person in order to go from a $17,000 per year earner to a multiple seven figure per year earner. What that looked like for me was getting around people who were operating at that next level that I wanted to be at. So I wanted to build a seven figure business. I completely immersed myself into environments where people were doing seven figures, that was the normal, to where I was the small person in the room, but I immersed myself into these environments to where pretty much all day, every day, I was consuming material. I was consuming books. I was consuming podcasts. I was in these mastermind communities because I wanted to immerse myself into an environment where the average level of thinking was seven figures. And through that proximity, I believe that with proximity, there's transformation created. I think one of the fastest ways to create transformation is by immersing yourself into close proximity with somebody or an environment where you reset the bar. The bar is elevated for yourself. And so that's one of I was reading books constantly, but I think one of the keys there was immersing myself into an environment to where I realized they are thinking about these situations differently than me. They're thinking about money differently than me. They're thinking differently about debt than I am. They're thinking about investing differently. And the more that I immerse myself into those environments, the more these patterns in my life begin to transform.
That's great advice, man. I mean, I think, Who Not How, I know Dan Sullivan, he's got a great podcast and is, definitely a fan of what he talks about, but appreciate you kind of bringing that little bit of a different perspective to everybody here as well. I know you did touch on one thing prior as well around the market selection. I know that's something I definitely wanted to hear more about for you, and we'll have to have you back on to really do a deep dive with our customers on this. But can you kind of share a little bit about your market selection formula, how you think about market selection, why it's so important, just a little bit of a crash course there for a few minutes would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, the way that I found out about market selection and why it was so important is, in the first 5 months, I had scaled my team, my business too quickly. I went from one market to operating in 4 different markets. Went from no team members to a team of 14 team members. And very quickly, I realized that not all real estate markets are created equal. Because in some markets, we had a really low cost per acquisition and high profitability. Other markets, we would get deals easily, but it was really hard to find buyers and profit margins were really low. Other markets, we had great profitability on our deals, but the cost per acquisition was really high. And so I got really curious on, I'm seeing this with my markets. And then when I started coaching other people, I paid attention to the people that were able to take off quickly, the people that were able to get deals under contract easier than others, and started to pay attention to these trends. And so what I started to put together, and then when I transitioned my business completely virtual, I put this model to the test. I developed a theory and then put it to the test. And now I operate in 4 different markets, all in different states. And every single time I followed this market process, meaning if a market meets this criteria and I go into a new market, so long as it meets this criteria, I've gotten deals within 2 weeks of being there and our average profit per deal is above $20,000 on wholesale deals.
Man.
Every single time I follow this formula. And I've seen it work hundreds and hundreds of times with the clients that I coach as well. And so I don't want to say that it's bulletproof, but it almost is bulletproof when it comes to selecting a market. If your market meets this criteria, you are teed up to be more successful than if it doesn't meet this criteria. So here's the criteria points. First criteria point is MSA population. So MSA population, what I'm looking for in a market is an MSA population above 400,000 MSA population. Now, MSA stands for Metropolitan Statistical Area. So instead of just looking at the city of Nashville, Tennessee, we're looking at Nashville, Tennessee, plus the surrounding cities. So the greater area. So what I'm looking for is above 400,000 MSA population. The reason why we want to be above 400,000 is because if we're below 400,000, couple of things. Number one, our scalability is going to be really low. We're not going to be able to do very many deals per month in that type of market. So we're going to be capped. There's going to be a ceiling, a low ceiling placed on us as far as how many deals we can do per month. Second, typically in those markets, it's harder to find buyers. A lot of times in markets where the MSA population is super low, it can be harder to find buyers because there's lower demand there. So that's the first criteria point. Second criteria point, which is one of the most important, is going to be median home price. So with median home price, I very strictly stay within a range of between 200,000 and 400,000 as a median home price. Now, on the low end, the reason why I don't go below 200,000 as a median home price is because profit margins start to drop whenever we're in a market where the median, the average home price, is below 200,000. That doesn't mean that we're not going to do deals where we contract it below 200,000 or we sell it below 200,000. It just means that we're looking at the average for the market. And I've seen this over and over and over again. The markets where the median home price is below 200,000, the profit margins are much lower. That's typically where we start to see profit margins dip below $20,000 per wholesale deal, $15,000 per wholesale deal. And this is something that we have full control over. We get to choose which markets we operate in. We're not confined to our backyard. And I actually believe that, I know a lot of people teach that you should start in your own backyard. I actually don't believe that. I believe that we should start where it's going to, we're going to be teed up for the best chances of success. So on the high end, the reason why I don't want to go below or above 400,000 as a median home price is because when we go above 400,000 as a median home price for the market, we're dealing with a more sophisticated seller, which means that typically in these types of markets, we're going to have to pay more in order to get a deal, meaning it's harder to negotiate with these sellers. It's harder to get a deal at a deeper discount with these sellers. So in these markets where the median home price is above 400,000, this is where our cost per acquisition starts to climb. We start to see a high cost per acquisition. So the sweet spot that I've found is between 200,000 and 400,000. Most of the markets that I'm operating in, we're between 275 and 340 as our median home prices for the markets that I'm operating in. And our average profit per deal is between $25,000 and $30,000 per wholesale deal. Mm-hmm. And median home price, market selection is one of the biggest contributing variables to us having that high of an average profit per deal. And so third variable is going to be average days on market. Now, average days on market, this is really important, especially for my business model, because most of the wholesale deals that I do, I am selling on the MLS via a straight wholesale on the MLS to an investor buyer or a novation on the MLS to a retail buyer. Because I'm selling a good portion of my deals on the MLS, the median days on market or the average days on market is a really important variable. What this tells us, how quickly are deals selling? Is there demand for properties on the buyer side in this market? So when I list a property, when I put a property out for sale, how quickly is this deal going to sell? So what I'm looking for is an average days on market below 50 days on market. The fourth variable is pending to active listing ratio. Pending to active listing. So what that means is if I'm looking at the total actively listed properties on the MLS right now, the percentage of them that are pending in relationship to the amount that are total listed on the market right now. And what I'm looking for is a pending to active ratio above 30%. Above 30%. What that means is that when a property goes live on the MLS, it goes under contract quickly. And so this is really, when we find markets like this, we're setting ourselves up for lower cost per acquisitions, or chances of a lower cost per acquisition, high profit margins on our deals, and high velocity on deal flow through the pipeline, meaning that when we put properties out for sale, the deal is going to sell quickly.
Yeah. And you touched on, briefly, you mentioned the Novation strategy there as well, and how you're disposing those properties. Can you kind of break down, define that, break down what that looks like for people, how you're closing more deals with that? Can you give us a little bit of a playbook there too?
Yeah, absolutely. So back in 2022, beginning of, I believe it was 2022, when interest rates started to change dramatically. It was beginning of 2022 that the Fed announced that they were going to start hiking the interest rates. And right at the beginning of 2022, I set out on a mission. I said, I've got to find other strategies that we can sell deals to different buyers than just these traditional investors, because all the investors started freaking out. 2022, mid 2022, when these interest rates started hiking, these investor buyers, they started freaking out, especially the ones that had lived through 08. They had PTSD and greatly reduced their buy box and their buying criteria to where, it was ridiculous. You couldn't hardly sell deals to off-market buyers. The professional investors who are operating at, some of these guys operating at still 70% of ARV minus repairs. And so we had to figure out how to sell to different types of buyers. And through tons of research, I invested tens of thousands of dollars into different coaching and programs and mentorship opportunities to learn, as many creative finance strategies, different types of deal structures. The one that I landed on, which was most similar to wholesaling, was novations. And so with a novation, a true novation means that it's a buyer replacement strategy, meaning that the end buyer, instead of assigning them your rights to the contract, they're fully replacing you in the transaction, which means that me as the wholesaler, I'm getting completely replaced and removed. And, I still get paid out at the closing. So it works very similarly. And with a novation, what this allows us to do is it allows us to sell to a retail buyer who's going to live in the property. Now, when we're selling to a retail buyer, because most of the transactions that happen in most markets, 80% of transactions that happen in a market are happening with retail buyers, meaning the person is going to buy the property to live in the property. And so we're missing out. If we're only selling to investors, we're missing out on all of these opportunities where the property might not need as much work, the seller might not have as much equity in the deal, or the seller's just wanting a higher asking price than what we could give them as a cash offer. If we're running our offer formula as 70% of ARV minus repairs minus our wholesale fee, or 75% of ARV minus repairs minus our wholesale fee, because it's such a the formula when you're selling to an investor, you're offering the seller the lowest price possible if you're following that formula. If we're going in at 70% of ARV minus repairs, minus our wholesale fee, we are giving them the lowest offer price possible. And it's only because we have to sell to an investor who has to make money on the deal. Now, if we can open this up to selling to a different type of buyer who doesn't need to make as much money or doesn't need to make any money on the deal, now our offer formula changes. So typically what it looks like with our offer formula on novations, we'll, just as an example, we'll start at what's the ARV minus the needed repairs, which should give us the as is retail price for the property. Meaning this is what the property could sell for on the MLS right now. Then we're subtracting about 5% just as a buffer on that. And then we subtract out real estate agent fees because the end buyer is going to have a real estate agent. We use a flat fee listing agent, and we subtract out the real estate agent fees. We subtract out our flat fee listing costs. We subtract out our closing costs. And that gives us, and then we subtract out our projected profit on our deal.
Right.
And that gives us our max allowable offer. So typically when you compare a novation offer price to a cash offer price, typically we're somewhere in the $30,000 to $50,000. There's usually a $30,000 to $50,000 discrepancy between a novation offer price and a cash offer price, which means that we're able to convert a significant amount of leads that would have never accepted a cash offer into deals. And so our offer to contract rate for my team is about 30 to 40% of the offers that we make to sellers get accepted. And a large part of that is because we utilize the Novation strategy.
Yeah. Is there anything there if they, say there's somebody who, watching this, trying to figure out how to make that offer, like, loves the formula you're laying out. Is there anything for a newer investor, especially, that they should keep an eye out on like, hey, here's where a Novation deal could go off the rails? Or is there anything like any kind of future proofing that they should be doing of, hey, make sure you nail this and this? And I mean, obviously that could be I'd love to have you back on for a deep dive on this topic too, but just curious there on like, especially for the newbie, what to look out for.
Yeah. With newer investors, the thing with novations is paperwork. There are a couple of differences in the process than with an assignment, for instance. So with an assignment, you're signing a purchase and sale agreement, and then you find an end buyer, and all you're doing is signing an assignment of contract agreement. So it's pretty simple on the paperwork side. A couple of things that are different with novations. There are several more agreements that you have to fill out. So we sign a purchase and sale agreement. Then we sign what's called we sign an affidavit of contract and notice of interest, which what this does is it puts a notice of interest on the property, which is basically like a lien that tells the county that we are under contract to purchase this house. And it kind of puts a lien on the property, which clouds title. And that's what lets, if the end buyer is using a conventional lender, that's what lets the lender know we have to get paid out on the deal in order for them to close the transaction. So we sign, the contract is called an affidavit of contract and notice of interest. Then another thing that we sign is an attorney in fact, which is similar to a limited power of attorney, which gives us the ability to list the property on the MLS on behalf of the seller and then sign a buyer purchase agreement on behalf of the seller. So we're acting on behalf of the seller in those two manners. Unlike a power of attorney, which would give us the ability to sign anything on behalf of the seller, it gives us the right to do those two things. So an attorney in fact. Then once we find a buyer, we sign a novation and indemnification agreement. which states, it details out that the buyer is going to replace us in the transaction. So this is basically a buyer substitution agreement. And then at the very end, this is right before closing, we sign what's called a release of notice of interest. Release of notice of interest, which lets the title company know, lets the lender know that we're releasing our notice of interest. And that's where they are notified, hey, we're going to get paid out on the deal because we're releasing this notice of interest. So those are, from a paperwork standpoint, you have to be cognizant of what paperwork needs to be signed in order to get these novation deals done. And then you also have to make sure that your title company is going to be okay with doing a novation transaction, because some title companies might be investor friendly for wholesales, meaning an assignment of contract or a double close, but they may not be familiar with novations, and due to ignorance around the transaction, they may be a little bit scared or timid about doing them. So finding a good title company is essential if you're going to be doing novations. One of the title companies that I prefer to use, it's a quote unquote nationwide title company, but they operate in, I think, like 20 states. It's called National Title, which if somebody looks up the website, it's national-title.com. And they are extremely novation friendly, extremely investor friendly, who I use for most of my transactions.
Man, so much good stuff here, James. So I know I ran way over on you, but this was so good I couldn't stop you. So again, really appreciate you coming on. We'll have to do a follow up in the future. Might have to have you on like a master class or something for our students here too. But what's the best way to connect with you? Like, I'd love for my audience to know how to get in touch with you. Appreciate you being a resource for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of ways they can connect. If somebody wants to dive into more of like the novation strategy and how like our whole process on that, I did detail out the process inside of my book, $1 Million Wholesaler. So if somebody goes to Amazon or Audible, they can go through the book. And I even have a lot of our scripts in there, even some contracts in there. But I really detail out the full novation process inside the book, $1 Million Wholesaler. That is on Amazon. And then, they can follow me on social media, reach out to me on social media. I'm on Facebook. Most of my social media is James F. Hodges. So James and then the letter F, Hodges. So that's on Facebook. That's on Instagram. Instagram is James F. Hodges. And then, those are the best places that they can reach out.
Perfect. Yeah. So we'll link to your social media, in the description here. We'll also link to your book and everything. So check that out, guys. We got a few other free resources there in the links section right there as well. But James, really appreciate you coming on. This was great. Enjoyed the conversation, man.
Absolutely, Matt. Really appreciate coming on, and hopefully everybody got value from it.
Absolutely. And everyone watching, is Matt Camp over here with DealMachine, and happy deal finding.